So my name is Kyle Crouch, Crouch. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky.
I'm Kevin Gamble, and I'm from Portland, Oregon.
My name's Colin. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, so Western Canada.
I'm first in line for Seinfeld Night at the Cyclones.
Pretty excited to be out here for this. Big Seinfeld fan.
The Kenny Rogers Roasters episode, that's a personal favorite. Obviously the Soup Nazi, Black and White Cookie. I mean, it could go on and on.
Tony Roma's chicken episode, we love that one. Puffy shirt, we're all looking forward to tonight's activities.
The Puerto Rican Day Parade. I'm looking forward to just getting the bobblehead. Getting my hands on that thing, and probably the first pitch with the Titleist is pretty sweet.
And the whole take on the JFK assassination, it's everybody's, one of their top 5 probably. That's a great episode.
I'm just seeing like some players in the puffy shirts batting up. That's pretty cool too.
How'd you hear about this event?
Just online. A buddy posted on Facebook, and then I decided to fly out here for this. So.
Well, I think they've done a lot of neat things, with the renaming of the stadium for one night and the place to air your grievances and a lot of the special things they're doing. But obviously the bobblehead's a big draw. I think everybody who's in line here this early, the bobblehead's a big deal since there's only like 3,000 of them. It's a pretty special thing to have.
I want to see the Elaine dance-off.
Okay, music, please. All right,
Well, when I was growing up, Seinfeld was kind of the biggest show on television. And I think the reason it's been so successful is that so much of it is just out of everyday life. The characters are all very relatable. You know somebody that's a George, you know somebody that's a Kramer. There's somebody that's a little quirky in your life. So much of it is relatable to everyday life. And then over the years, it's been 25 years since the show first aired. So many parts of the show have actually become part of everyday pop culture and nomenclature. And when people sneeze, people say you're so good looking. People say yada 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 when you're talking about things. There's just so many different things that happened in the show that became part of everyday life that I think it's just kind of grown from even when I was a kid, when I would first start to watch it, and then the fact that it's on syndication and basically on every television station. Whenever you want to find an episode of Seinfeld, it's on a cable network someplace. So it's just one of the great shows in television history, and there's just so many things that are relatable and so many things that we could build a night around. I'm a fan of George. George to me is kind of like a lovable loser. I know on Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David gets offended when people say that, but he's a funny guy. Everybody has a friend like him. I feel like I have about 12 friends like him. So he's just a guy that he's the everyman, and there's so many parts of him that are just so memorable throughout the show. Well, every year we have an off-season meeting where we look at anniversaries that'll be coming up the next year, whether it be movies, television shows, or other pop culture events. So one thing that came up was a Seinfeld night for the 25th anniversary of the show. And we'd already been discussing doing a Keith Hernandez bobblehead. So the tie-in was just, it made too much sense. People have done bobbleheads of Keith Hernandez with baseball uniforms on, with his gold gloves, whatever you want to do. Nobody had ever done a Keith Hernandez Magic Loogie bobblehead, and that's one of the most popular episodes in the history of the show. It's definitely a fan favorite for people. So we started with that, and then from the bobblehead idea, just sprouted so many other ideas that made the night so successful and so much fun to be a part of. My favorite episode is probably the Magic Loogie episode. I mean, I was a Mets fan growing up, so I always knew Keith Hernandez, I knew Roger McDowell, and I just love the tie-ins with the actual Mets that are on the show sporadically throughout the seasons. But the Magic Loogie episode is definitely my favorite. It's so absurd and ridiculous, but it's played out so well. I mean, they mock Oliver Stone movies with the JFK assassination, which is kind of ridiculous, but it was done in such a playful way that it made it work. Well, there were actually about a list of about 25 or 30 of them that I came up with help from other guys in the office, and we kind of narrowed it down to the 5 or 8 or 10 that we thought would work the best. everybody had their favorites. You know, people were submitting ones throughout. Once it became such a media phenomenon with people tweeting at us from all over the globe, telling us things that we should do. We thought of the ones that would look the best visually. I mean, having somebody with a marble rye hanging from a fishing hook, that's just absurd and ridiculous. So that was one that we wanted to be a part of. The Elaine dancing contest was just, I mean, there's so many bad dancers and everybody wanted to be a part of that one, so that was great. The knife and fork Snickers contest, that was great. I mean, everything we did that night was just amazing. And the best part of it is that we already have, you know, a list of 10 or 12 other things that we want to add for next year that we hadn't thought of. So the show, like I said, the show was on TV for such a long time, and there's so many episodes that are so popular and everybody kind of has their own favorite. There's so many different things you could do to make the night so successful. My favorite in-game thing that we did, at one point during the night, it was before the game started, and the house was full. There was 8,000 people already in the ballpark before we even threw the first pitch, and they were having the Snickers knife and fork eating contest. And I stood there for a minute and just kind of looked around, and I said, there are 8,000 people cheering for 3 college kids eating Snickers bars with knives and forks. This is absurd and amazing all at the same time. So that was kind of my favorite moment from the night. But also we had the cereal eating contest pregame, and the guy that won that, when he won the contest, he was interviewed by some media folks that were here, and the guy said, I have my high school reunion in 10 days, and I finally have something I could tell them that I'm proud of. So just the absurdity of that statement alone made everything that happened pregame, the cereal eating contest, the Snickers eating contest, that whole thing was my favorite. I think everybody loved the Elaine dancing contest. Everybody really enjoyed seeing the marble rye contest. Everybody liked the pick or scratch that we did on the big board. But kind of my favorite thing that we saw throughout the night was that so many people were dressed up in costume. There was a woman that was walking around with giant latex gloves of giant oversized hands, and she was man hands. She was walking around as man hands. There was people dressed up like David Putty with the New Jersey Devils jersey and the face paint on, screaming, "You got to support the team." There was a guy wearing a David Putty's 8-ball jacket, and all signs point to yes. So that was kind of my favorite part of it. We had guys with giant fat heads in the outfield of all the characters that they passed around the bleachers, so that was good. But I kind of think my favorite part that kind of took place during the entire night, we got a tweet from somebody that was in the women's restroom that ran out of toilet paper, and she asked the woman next to her if she had any toilet paper that she could pass underneath the stall, and the lady told her, "I can't spare a square." So everybody, from the second you walked into the gates until the game was over, everybody was in the state of mind of Seinfeld. The whole media coverage of Seinfeld Night was something that I'd never experienced. I mean, I've been here for major events that we've had in the past. I mean, the first game in the history of the franchise, when baseball came back to Brooklyn for the first time in almost 50 years, that was a huge media event. But I almost feel like Seinfeld Night was almost bigger, which is kind of absurd when you think about it.
Call it the game about nothing.
25th anniversary of Seinfeld is celebrated on the baseball diamond.
Watch this, Jude. The Mets minor league team decided to dedicate a weekend games to all things Seinfeld.
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 Salute to Seinfeld Night, honoring the show's 25th anniversary. I know you're a huge Seinfeld fan.
That would be an understatement.
Honoring all things Seinfeld.
On this day, 25 years ago, Seinfeld debuted, and today the Mets minor league team paid tribute to that little show about nothing. The Brooklyn Cyclones pulled out all the stops, warming up in Seinfeld's signature puffy shirts.
Minor league affiliate dedicating their game tonight to all things Seinfeld.
Seinfeld's kind of become such a part of pop culture, and especially in New York. There's so many parts of New York just life that have been incorporated into the show, and fans all over the city, all over the world really love the show. So it just made sense for us to try to bring not only what everybody loves about baseball, but what everybody loves about the show to the ballpark for one day.
Never eat cereal, and so I'm just going to go as gavone as possible on it. I'm going to eat as quick as possible and have a lot of fun doing it.
The line formed for everyone eager to get the Keith Hernandez Magic Loogie bobbleheads. And for those of you who don't know, you can catch all the Seinfeld episodes on Pix 11 at 11 o'clock Monday through Friday nights. I'm certainly be watching. I love Seinfeld.
From the second we announced it, we just did it via Twitter and social media. And within 3 days, the Seinfeld Night story was the most viewed story in the history of our website. We had 50,000 hits in 3 days for one story on our site, which is absurd. I mean, people were talking about it, and Mike and Mike on ESPN were talking about it the next day. Local radio stations, we were getting media requests from Australia. I did 3 morning radio shows in Australia. I did an evening show in Canada after the Rangers-Flyers hockey game, where a guy that played basketball his whole life, works for a baseball team, was talking on the post-game show in Canada, in Toronto, about the Rangers-Flyers. I think it was Rangers-Flyers. Yeah, Rangers-Flyers. Stanley Cup playoffs game, talking about Seinfeld Night afterwards. So that was kind of absurd. But then the night itself, we had people from every corner of the globe, basically, that came to cover the night. There was media from 50 different states. All 50 states in the union had highlights of our Seinfeld Night air on the news in that state. We had media from 5 different countries. We had fans that came from close to 20 different states to come to the game that night. So just everything about that night, from the fans, from the media, from just the excitement on social media, it was something like I'd never been a part of before. The night itself was so successful, not only because of what we did as an organization to plan for it, but what the fans put into it. I mean, it was something where the ballpark, literally everybody here was into the night. I mean, it was one of our worst losses of all time. I mean, we lost 18-2, I think, and it was one of our worst losses of all time. And after the game, there were still 7,000 people here to run the bases. I mean, the game took forever. We were getting killed. We lost by 2 touchdowns, more than 2 touchdowns, and people were still here to be a part of it. I mean, we had the closest to the blowhole challenge after the game, and we sold all of our launcher balls so people could throw the tennis balls at an inflatable whale on second base. I mean, the absurdity of everything that took place that night was like nothing I've ever been a part of, and it was all because the fans were so into it. And it wasn't just a baseball game. The baseball game was basically secondary that night. And we always say that when we're promoting the Cyclones, because we can't control the product on the field, but we can control everything that happens in the stands. So that night was basically everything that we stand for as an organization, where regardless of what happens on the field, anybody that was here went home, and they were ecstatic about what happened that night, regardless of the score of the game.